Hello, this is Ukraine 101, a podcast in which two Ukrainians are having a frank conversation. Today we will talk about Ukrainian food and drinking traditions, the so called corruption in Ukraine, as well as Russian myths about Nazis in Ukraine.
You're listening to Co Station.
We are co-station.
Station. And what do we do?
We talk about Ukraine.
One on one.
One on one.
It's a honest
You and
conversation.
me.
You and us.
Today is I guess sort of the easiest to digest episode. We wanted to touch upon a few myths that we've heard or you've seen about Ukraine. Do quick explainers. It's not going to be like a fast-paced episode. We'll still provide some context. But we will touch upon like say 5, 6. Her we managed to squeeze in this hour a number of topics. We will touch a little bit on the I suppose economy and politics, right? A little bit about just the nature. A little bit about the culture, the food.
So we'll start with hard to digest topics, and we'll ease you into the easy to digest topics as you'll quite literally want to digest something at that moment. Yeah, exactly. But I think there are a few categories of things that annoy Ukrainians to the extent that it's impossible to describe. Like, what are your personal?
My personal gripe, my biggest one.
Yeah.
Let me think. So, I think I sort of let me get there by an anecdote. Right.
Love it.
I think the worst stereotype that I ever heard. I was talking to my friend from Iran, and someone asked them, "Hey, do you know how to drive?" Because they thought that you all go sort of by camels, right, and horses.
Oh, really? That's what we do in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, except we use goats and bulls.
Yeah. And horses.
Obviously.
Yeah.
When we go south to mine salt, and then we come back and we ride this huge bulls.
Yeah, horse cart. Yeah,
exactly.
that's as far as our progress has taken us.
Hey, we invented the wheel. We swear by it.
We haven't even gotten there yet.
So I think what annoys me the most is when people talk about Ukraine infrastructure, right, as if it's uniform, right, and also as if it's just non-existent.
So infrastructure is your biggest point of annoyance, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, sort of. When people also assume that there is nothing, just bare land, right, and then people pop up from the mines and they go and they harvest wheat, I suppose.
Okay.
What about you?
Awesome. Well, I think I'm more alongside the being straight on fed Russian propaganda, when people don't realize this. So all the narratives alongside the Ukraine just kind of appeared out of nowhere, out of a goodwill of Russia as an independent state in 1991. There's no history of statehood, and I'm just like, look with your eyeballs. And I'm just thinking, obviously claim to a specific to specific historical events, so that marking them as Ukrainian and things like that. That's always going to be the job of historians to just basically decide what is and what isn't Ukraine. And much of the mainstream history that people learn about is probably also, again, very influenced by Russian propaganda. But I'm just like, well, I don't know, like, go on and like see when Ukraine is mentioned for the first time, and also Google why Russians get so upset when you mention the word Muscovy, although it is a kind of in line with the name of their capital city. Like, why do they get so butthurt? Because, that basically describes...
Do you know the anecdote? That's the name of Russia.
Oh, even if I do, our listeners are keen to hear it.
Yes, so you're welcome. The anecdote is that I don't remember the name of the dude anymore. I think he was president of Kiev Academy, and he moved to Moscow, which at that time was still Moscovian Empire, or whatever, like again along the lines of Moscow something. And then he suggested to rename it to Russia for branding reasons, and like just the fact that it was a Ukrainian dude who did that makes me go, whoops, I guess we also messed up a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's not the first case of in history when um, kind of the cradle of the future empire lies outside of the empire itself, and then it eventually gets absorbed by it, like it happened to ancient Greece by means of being absorbed by the Roman Empire. Um, there's even like this little derogatory way in which the Russians are in like they are referring to Ukraine as Little Russia, Malorossia, but actually I'm gonna say it in very bad Greek, but then there's like the big Greece is basically Megali Lenika is or Elada, I don't know how to say it correctly, is how the Greeks are basically they are referring to everything outside of Greece that some of them consider still to be historically, supposed to be a part of Greece. And then they refer to the Mikrai Lada, which I'm guessing I'm also mispronouncing correct completely, as the heartland of that original, the OG Greece. So then, being the big version of something which is like the Velikorossia, whatever the Russians are referring to themselves as, which is like Big Russia. Yeah, that's like because we also,
Yeah,
as I
it
said,
has a nice parallel to the Greek story.
exactly, yeah. So then even these type of things and how they are just being influenced by propaganda and rewriting those narratives, that usually pisses me off. But that's because I take deep interest in history, still very, at the very amateur level. So please don't quote me on anything I say in this podcast, pretty please. But yeah, I'm just wondering like why people are lazy to just like go and see the origins of the word Kievan Rus, why they think that Rus means Russia, and it doesn't occur to them that Russia has stolen this name just like everything else. So yeah, that kind of stuff. But today we are here to talk about a few topics,
Yeah, which is not history.
which is not history. We are not going to bore you with this, and we're also going to have a few very fun interactive moments in which will allow you to basically almost feel like you are doing this one-on-one with us. And my second favorite topic is
Corruption.
yay, corruption.
You agree
Ukraine
with
is
that?
so corrupt. It's awful. You cannot leave your house without paying someone a bribe, obviously. Like that's why you have to go buy a bull or buy a horse cart, right? Yeah, so again, I'll sound like a broken record, but it is a piece of Russian narrative that has unfortunately become very, very successful and even is impacting the course of the current Russo-Ukrainian war. What do you think? Like if you ask a stranger on the street, like give any specific example of Ukraine being a corrupt country after they've confirmed that Ukraine is a corrupt country, do you think they will be able to do that?
So, I mean, I've heard this a few times, right? I don't think people who were saying it could produce any evidence on the spot or not, or sort of even if you gave them a little bit of time. Um, so, in my experience, this usually aligns with somehow people who are obsessed with Hunter Biden. And then yeah,
It's a very narrow
I know, right?
sample, but okay.
No, I mean, but also sort of it was somehow a talking point, and I really don't know sort of why this was the thing that people yeah latched upon or on. But I would guess that so because Hunter Biden I think was in the board of directors of one of the companies in Ukraine. Um, which, as far as I understand, didn't necessarily have any corruption element to it. He was just paid. But then there was one with declaring those that income in the U.S., which is the story for the trial
So
he's going
basically,
to.
some to summarize, some American tried to screw the
The
American
IRS.
taxing system, yeah, the IRS, and then we are to
Allegedly.
blame. Makes sense. Please don't ever help Ukraine again because it's such a corrupt country. Whatever you
I think he
know.
was even trying to help. I am not sure sort of what his job there was exactly.
No, but this is something you
Purposely,
often hear is that, oh, Ukraine is so corrupt. Why are we even helping them? And the question is like, we who? And then secondly, often you see those balance sheets that are saying, well, or well, you never see them, but okay, quite literally it says, yeah, Ukraine is getting billions, millions, but all of those billions, millions are basically like equipment, most of it also pretty old. That's just standing there rotting away in the American, I don't know, airfields and military bases. So you're just also thinking like, I mean, come on, do some like basic, investigation. And that not to deny the fact that Ukraine has a problem with corruption, which has its historical reasons and explanations. But like, just how bad is it that it overshadows in these
no, almost
times when,
anything. Yeah.
yeah, in times when it's critical to continue helping Ukraine, for everyone's sake, pretty much. I think it's pretty peculiar, and that's how you also can almost instantaneously recognize that it's a piece of.
Yeah, if you want to ask who benefits from it, right, then often you'll find yourself looking at Russia.
I have a fun game to play.
Yeah,
So,
yes.
because I do want to keep it as as interactive as possible, I did this thing which is going on the website of Transparency International, which is for our listeners is an internationally recognized body for basically regulating, or well, sorry, not regulating, but reporting on the corruption index. And obviously, it's going to be based on a lot of different things, but it's just basically the representation of how the society itself, so people who live in the country, unlike some, random foreigners, how people in this country that eventually and ultimately suffer most from the corruption or benefit from the absence of it. So they're able to give their sentiment about this. Right. So then I went in their website and I just decided to like look up where Ukraine is in that list. So
So I know where Netherlands are, uh, uh, but for Ukraine, I don't think I. So I remember looking at the news that involved Transparency International at some point. But if you ask me now, where is exactly? I don't think I'll give you a good answer. But let's try this.
okay, so on the index of Transparency International, where do you think Ukraine has landed? Out of 100, there are 180 states that are being evaluated.
Yeah. So my guess would be around like 80s or 90s.
So it is 104, which is very well done. And then okay, so that's like Ukraine, right? It's a country at war. Admittedly, it was probably also somewhere in around there before the
How
big
did it
wars
sort
broke out.
of how did it change in the years that we were? I mean, because also the war has been around for 10 years now, right? And I can imagine that the trajectory was not monotonous, right, throughout those years.
Yeah, let me see if there's any information that I can easily find. I do see that it reports that it's gotten 3 points better than last year. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Good.
it the score is now higher than in okay, so this is the 2023 data, and then it's up 3 points since 2022.
Okay, so we're going up. At
Yeah,
least in
we're going up.
year.
We're going up. Yeah, there's a little bit of positive dynamics. Yeah, so then and then I was just mentioning countries to you like Lithuania, which is like I don't know where I said about Lithuania. Let's check it again. Lithuania is number 34, so that's actually very good if
Right,
you think
right.
about it.
But also, the like you can what you call it, just sort them right from a country with the highest transparency index, right, to the country with the lowest. But then there's also the index itself. Like you get assigned a number, right? According to which you're sorted.
Yeah, of course. And that one is as perceived by people living in the country.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Do we know what the difference would be then between Ukraine and Lithuania, like in terms of that number?
Yeah. So Ukraine is 36. Scores
Transparency score, yeah.
transparency score is 36, and Lithuania is 64. I thought just now. Yeah. So it's probably there are quite a few countries that are just basically sharing a spot or something,
Yeah.
as I can imagine. And so the highest score is with Denmark. Second comes Finland, and so on. And then for example, the U.S. is number 24. The vanguard of democracy and all of that. Barbados comes before the United States of America. Seychelles come before the United Kingdom. But then, Estonia comes before the United States. I mean, would people in the United States even know much about Estonia? But yeah, I mean, so all these quite unexpected. Cape Verde is number 30. Wow,
Yeah, but I
there's
mean, it's also when you do a poll, right? Then I can imagine that your transparency index generally uh, is worse if you have more people, right? Sort of.
yeah, but it's
I understand that sort of you just do polling, right? And it's kind of self-reported, like not exactly, but you get what I'm saying. Um, and I guess my point here is that there are some variables that influence the score um, that are kind of intrinsic to metrics that don't necessarily have anything in common with corruption per se.
Yeah.
But that's just an aside.
That's a very scientific explanation. What I was going to suggest is just see how we compare to some of the EU countries, right? Because when we think about the EU, we are like, oh, absence of corruption, rule of law, human rights. So, for example, I'm looking right now at Greece. And Greece is number 59, which is okay. Admittedly, it's quite far from Ukraine.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 45 positions away, but its score is only 49, and Ukraine is 36, right? So that just basically also means that Greece, as isn't there where democracy is started in the first place? The way the country itself is doing in terms of you know dissatisfaction with the government and with how things are going. I mean, this is not surprising to me that people might be saying, okay, our systems are not really working to punish corruption and things like that. So, and if you look at the rank is 59, but score is 49, meaning that Greece is only halfway to being a corruption-free country. As a with 100%, meaning 100% transparent and not corrupt. This means that also between Greece and Ukraine, there are a lot of countries that are just basically having, there are only 13 points in between of them, but that just means that there are a lot of countries that are similar to Ukraine in the world, and I'm going to tell you also in a sec what those are. But also, very interestingly, Cyprus.
Yeah, so I think Cyprus in my head is a tax haven, right? That is willing to sell you anything if you're willing to pay. I am sorry for being so stereotypical and judgmental about Cyrus. Um, I wonder how it stacks against the real world.
Well, its rank is 49, so I do not believe a single a single part of this. But then we can also look at countries like Bulgaria, also part of the EU, right? Where do you think that one is sitting?
If I had to guess, I would say so. Like we're doing. Let's do the ranking because it's a bit easier. And Greece was position 50. Is that right?
59.
59. Yeah. Then I would guess that Bulgaria is like a little bit higher, but not by much. So maybe 50.
Bulgaria is 67.
Nice. Yeah. Go Bulgaria.
Romania is 63. And those are the newly acquired European countries, or well, newly acquired European Union member states that have
recently entered the EU.
yeah, well, This is also after years and years and years of Europe investing. I mean, I know a few things about that. Europe investing into building out strong institutions, and
That's your background, right?
yeah, yeah, indeed, European studies. And but since I'm Ukrainian, there's no way I have had good education, and I'm actually unable to speak English. This is just a voiceover.
I mean, I can barely read.
So yeah, but I think it's an interesting exercise, right? Because like all these countries are basically a member of the European Union for a while, so it's not like they joined yesterday or like 2 days ago. And the EU is very serious about building out the functioning institutions, and yet they're struggling with these things. And we are a country at war, and self-identifying Ukrainians that just go out there and like do a freaking revolution every 10 years because our government is not delivering what it says it will deliver. We like holding our government accountable, and that's why we know we can do better. So I think just putting these things into perspective is it was a very good
Perhaps that's
exercise.
another one to attack. Like I wasn't thinking about it before, but um. So do you wanna keep talking about corruption, or do you wanna do another one?
Yeah, I think we can move on to another one if you want to.
Because like you just made me realize that I think even because we use the word revolution for the protests, right? That were in 2004 and 2014. That gives an image of an extremely unstable political climate.
Right.
And I mean, the times when I mention it, people usually assume like almost a coup, right? When there are tanks rolling and the country is just ungoverned.
That was in Russia, though.
So,
We didn't have the text.
um, and so I never actually saw it being formulated out loud, but I often encounter people who hint at it, right? Or sort of whose perception of Ukraine aligns very much with this image of instability. Um, and I think so. I guess first of all, that's not really true. And I wonder whether we're not at fault to an extent for this, right? Because we chose to call them the Orange Revolution, right, and the Revolution of Dignity. Um, and I mean, I think it's an interesting. It's interesting why this happened, right? Because I think as a protester, right, so who goes out there and who because so the context is 2004. There was an election, and people went out because they thought that the election was
Rigged.
rigged. I think in the end the disparity in votes wasn't that high, but it was there, right? And then what happened is they went out to protest, and then at some point the Constitutional Court said, "No, let's just do another tour, right? Because the previous one was not up to standards." So then that happened, right? And then we got a new president.
Should we also give some details as to who was going to win it initially and who won eventually?
Yeah. So Ukraine, I think it was by that time it was fourth presidential term, right, that we had, as far as I remember. So we had Kravchuk for one term, right? Then Kuchma for 2 terms, and then he couldn't do the third one, right? So it had to be someone else.
That was the only reason.
Well, I mean, you can
You
not
could have changed the constitution like they do in Russia, but they didn't
or you
because
could
we're
just walk away
actual democratic functioning society. I
with
think.
your prime minister, yeah. Yeah. So, but the story indeed is that the previous president had a protege who sort of was falling in the line of the like political vision, right? That Kuchma had, and the his protege was Yanukovych. And then there was an alternative candidate, Viktor Yushchenko, both of them called Victor, so that's confusing. And what happened is the second tour of the election, where Yanukovych was going against Yushchenko, right, was indeed rigged. And that's why people went out to protest. And in the end, Yushchenko won after another tour. But my point was, because you got me distracted, that people who go out there and protest, right, because of this, it also feels to them. So my guess would be that partially this is this is due to Ukraine being a very young democracy, right? And then there is not like, especially coming out of the Soviet Union, you don't have a continuous history of political like active political involvement, right? And then it's very understandable that any kind of protest, any kind of whenever you speak out, whenever you go out there and you try to demand like a proper procedure, uh, it feels almost yeah, like intangible. It feels almost impossible to change these things, right? Um, and then I understand why Ukraine would go for a world revolution, but at the same time, I wonder if like you take some kind of textbook, encyclopedia definition of a textbook, and ask whether that actually qualifies the Orange Revolution as a revolution. My bet would be on a no, right? Because in the end, there was no political vacuum. There was like I would say peaceful what you call it a
Trans-
power
yeah.
transfer of power, yeah.
Yeah.
um and the instability was limited to protest suppression.
Well, I think in the case with Orange Revolution, generally, I think that you're raising a very good point, and I will have to come back to my little screen by the way in a second because I found something fascinating as a. But I think one of the important things that you're raising is that the tendency to use the word revolution and associate it with something that is otherwise unstable, maybe precarious, not sure if it's a real thing, or are these, whatever Ukrainians, or like, are they just trying to stir up the pot? I think that is very much applicable towards how history is studied mostly from the West. And there were a lot of revolutions labeled to things that were happening in or like the revolutionary label has been applied to events happening in the non-Western countries. And I don't know, this is just a random hypothesis. I bet there's like something I will be able to find in terms of um, academic work to confirm or refute this. But I know that in Georgia there was also this Rose Revolution, and then there is like this Velvet Revolution. And will you call Black Lives Matter BLM movement a revolution? Well, probably won't, but it's just like civil demonstration of discontent with what the government policy is, or otherwise what some of the institutions that are close to the government, whatever they're doing. In this case, law enforcement. So yeah, I definitely I think this is a very important point to bring up. Whether we should use a different word for it, I don't know, because I guess it will be a bit difficult to reapply it.
Ukrainians would agree with it, right? And in the end, I'm not suggesting to even name it, but I think it does us a disservice in a way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think if you think of both, like both were like very civilized. I mean, during one of them I was like, well, 10, and during the second one I was actually an active participant, so was out there, and I have to say that it was like the ultimate, like, that's the vibe that you're getting usually at the demonstrations here in the Netherlands when we go to rallies. People are helpful, you're just having a chat, and it's not just like, oh, I want to, like, murder every single member of the government. But you're just by showing up, you're just showing that I'm not an empty space, right? And so that's why I think in the context of revolutions, I mean, good that the word coup exists because then you can see go one degree more radical kind of. But I think, yeah, it's good to add an asterisk there that it's probably not a revolution as in the sense of like the French Revolution, or you name it. So
Because
does it.
even like because the Orange Revolution, right, is like a more tame one in that sense. Right, the Revolution of Dignity is a bit more violent, but even then, what happened like in practice, right, is that the or sort of at least the formal way that it went down is that the president was what you call it, not sanctioned. There is a word,
Impeached.
impeached. Yes, thank you
Yeah.
very much. Um, and then we had another election, right? So that's also not like, if I think about what a revolution is, right? Then I think if I think about French Revolution, right? But I doubt that's the way it went for them, right? And so in a way, right, I would say the word revolution still brings associations that aren't necessarily true to nature or true to facts.
It's a broad term.
Yep.
Hey, I have some statistics.
Sure, shoot me. Or kid me.
I won't shoot you for the life of me, but I did figure out, okay, so why Ukraine is basically sitting on such a crappy spot in the list. And that is because, for example, Greece and Namibia both have the same rank, which, by the way, is also, I think, as interesting to just see names of countries that of which you like don't hear otherwise so quite often, and then you're thinking, oh, actually, it's interesting to just see them kind of close to each other. So Greece and Namibia both have a rank of 59, so that's like that's how far they're in the list, and score of 49, so they're halfway to being corruption free. And so they both take 59. So the next, so there are two countries, 59, and the next country that appears in line is Vanuatu, and that one is 61. See, so they skip 60. That means that there are a lot of countries, as my hypothesis was, that just basically all of them have rank 70, so they're 70s out of 180, because they all have 43, 43, 43 as a score. So essentially, speaking of the European Union and countries that have been integrated as member states for a while, let's see our friend Hungary. Number
You have it
76.
out for Hungary.
Next to Moldova, North Macedonia, and Trinidad and Tobago. Ha! Interesting. And then we have a whole bunch of, countries sitting on like the 83, and then it skips to 87, and then it skips to 93, and then it skips to 98, and then it skips to 104. So actually, the step between and figuratively speaking, a Hungary and a Ukraine is not that huge. But yeah, I think these are all very good things, and they kind of like bring us to this narrative that is going on about Ukraine. So definitely do your homework, especially if you're advocating for other things and for other countries. I won't name them, getting help, and you have no problem with that. But then you say, oh, Ukraine shouldn't get help because it's corrupt. Like, take a look at this index and see where the country you're advocating for is on and where Ukraine is, and think, okay, like probably there will be a degree of terrible things happening, including people benefiting off wars. I do know that this exists and existed in all times. In England during the Second World War, it was a disaster, actually, how corrupt that country was, and just all kinds of outrageous things that were happening to the American aid initially. So yeah, do put these things in perspective. There's no option not to help Ukraine because you'll be next. Sorry. Let's move on.
If we're already talking about the image of Ukraine in the world, I think there is another big one.
Oh, does it start with an N
Oh yes,
and end with an I?
that,
Four-
that is
Four
correct.
letters.
Yes. So we're talking about, of course, Nazis, and of course, the sort of the image of Ukraine as a country that is almost overtaken by Nazis, or maybe not even almost, just completely overtaken, ruled, and that is why Russia has to save the world and just murder every second person, because that's the only way you cleanse Ukraine.
Obviously, yeah. That's let's dig in.
Sure.
Let's dig in.
Have you ever been asked?
Where do we start?
Have you ever been asked, hey, why Ukraine is so Nazi?
No, I think generally I'm so intimidating because I talk so much. I don't allow people.
Yes, so buff.
Yeah, I'm just
Mhm.
hella buff and I talk a lot. So people don't dare to ask these type of questions. Usually whenever I get asked anything about Ukraine, it's like coming from afar, such as, oh, don't you guys like, haven't you like, don't you speak Russian there? Um, right. But I think the Nazi, like the issue with the imaginary Nazi problem is a real one. I think one of the precedents is that, or like not the precedents, but direct consequences of that is just how real people in the Ukrainian armed forces, which is again just a reminder, is the only thing that is holding Russia from attacking your country if you are elsewhere in the West. So people in the Ukrainian armed forces not getting the equipment, not getting the aid they should be getting while being at the front lines, because there was some BS bill issued in God knows when, like 2017 in the US, saying that paramilitary organizations that one way or another associated might have been allegedly somewhere stood next to an alleged neo-Nazi cannot get any type of support. from the United States in terms of like the military aid, right? And that is a huge problem because real people will die, and these people will be from all walks of lives, and they definitely will not be Nazis in this case because there will be the Ukraine being a
But so, like,
like
we can also name names here, right? The issue mostly concerns Azov, right? And then, do you know that not so long ago, Azov was cleared off the bill, right? So Azov is now,
it was, yeah, it was, but too little, too late, and the
yes, that's true.
the fact that these things come up is also just a showcase of just how well that Russian propaganda is working to accuse us of being Nazis. And I mean, this is a podcast about Ukraine. I won't point towards Russia and say how many neo-Nazi formations are active in there. But I think one of the most important things is just like no, it's actually different from the corruption story, right? Because I think one of the important matters about being called a Nazi is a definition of what Nazism is. Shall I pull up the definition? Like, so we can just like look at what it is.
Sure.
I like definitions because they just really allow you to see what something is and then also make a deduction of like what something is not. So I'm gonna have amazing Google search results after this.
What is
Okay.
a Nazi?
Okay, a Nazi is a member of a German political party that controlled Germany from 1933 to 1945 under Adolf Hitler. Second, disapproving an evil person who wants to use power to control and harm other people, especially because of their race, religion, etc. Yeah,
So I guess like first and foremost, we're dealing with the second one of the first.
I'm not sure. Is it maybe still 1934? And no, it's definitely 2024. And yeah, I mean, from where I stand, keen to hear what you think. For us, it's very simple, right? Ukraine and the Russo-Ukrainian war, as it broke out in 2022 in its large-scale version, but also the one that had been going on since 2014, consolidated Ukrainian society to the extent where, but more so after 2022, admittedly, where you see people, where you see Jews, where you see Muslims, where you see Christians, where you see people from
Like
uh,
all confessions, right?
all
And
confessions,
all
but also all
backgrounds.
different ethnicities. I mean, Roma, Greeks, Armenians, and I'm just speaking out of experience, by the way, ethnic Russians for that matter, Ukrainians, Georgians, I mean,
Crimean Tatars.
Crimean Tatars, Chechens, everyone is just kind of just like, yo, either joining the armed forces or otherwise helping in any other way, which is, as we say in Ukraine, you're either in the army or for the army, which effectively probably does not eliminate every form of racial or otherwise discrimination, but just shows that the society is actually there to. Excuse me, I'm gonna quote this, but it's it's there to counter those people who want to use power to control and harm other people, which is us in this case. So if we are going by definition, Ukrainians are not and have not been in the history of our independent state in a war of conquest against any other state. We have been an all-around peaceful state. There's no reason for us to have anything like a mass neo-Nazi movement because we are not waging those wars against any of our neighbors or otherwise.
But I think it's also interesting in that case, like sort of, or I like looking at elections in this context, right? Because the people are talking about Nazis more in or after 2013, right? And I think to a big extent, the association that was established was with people who were volunteering, right, to fight and to sort of go to the east, right? And then we had an election in, I believe, 2016, the parliamentary one, or was it a bit later?
Perhaps, yeah.
Um,
I wouldn't remember.
point is
I
that
was already abroad, unfortunately.
I think no, I was in Ukraine. The point is that that in that election there was the biggest party that you could even associate, right, with far right, and I wouldn't. So the name of the party is Freedom or Svoboda. I wouldn't call them Nazis by any stretch, to be honest, but I think it's as close, sort of on the if you take a spectrum from definitely not a Nazi to a Nazi, right? That's as close to that's as close as you can come to Nazis, right? Among the parties who were um, trying to get in Ukrainian parliament, and that party got, I believe, 2%. So I'm not sure whether they had a seat at all. But point is that was the, uh, I guess the general sentiment of the Ukrainian public uh, about even like far right radical views. Like I wouldn't even call them that radical, to be honest. Like let's just go far right. Um,
Let's put things in perspective. Alternative für Deutschland. I mean, where are we there? I think they're going to be. I think they're going to be way more radical right than
they already are.
Svoboda. Right. So just to put things in to calibrate them, because I bet nobody is gonna. Well, please do Google Svoboda freedom. Um, make your own conclusions. Right. We are making this intellectual podcast for intellectuals, obviously. But also take a look at people like Le Pen in France. Look at their party
You look at
agenda.
Wilders.
Look at Wilders. By the way, hello
So
from the
again,
Netherlands.
just for your perspective, right? I would say that Svoboda is not even a half as radical as Wilders is. I don't think I've ever heard them advocate sort of to expel anyone, right? I think where they stand is more in the Christian traditional values, which doesn't doesn't sit well with me. Like
The most right wing party we have in Ukraine is the good old Christian Democrats.
yeah.
But yeah, like I think it's very good that you're invoking actually the representative democracy, and also especially from the perspective that Ukraine has had. You will be saying, oh, representative democracy. So what? Ukraine is a precarious young state where that is not really functioning. But you can imagine how much that matters for us, because every time there was an attempt to rig an election or go against the will of the Ukrainian people, we were like, well, we're gonna take the streets
Force.
by force or whatever, yeah, or by peaceful protest as we did, right, which resulted in the yeah, indeed civic movement, and just basically really showing that this is not okay. You cannot take our representative democracy away from us. um so I think this is an important point to make. If you do look at the statistics of Google entries, basically Ukraine Nazi somehow very mysteriously started trending in this specific combination in 2014, just like it skyrocketed. And 2014 is also, of course, the year when Russia started a massive, I would call it a defamation propaganda campaign against Ukraine. That was basically accompanied by the invasion back in 2014. And it did such a good work because it just basically gaslighted Europe, pun intended, into believing that, Ukraine is not really being invaded, and actually Ukraine has a Nazi problem, and all those things just went hand in hand. So Russia would be able to sell its gas and oil to Europe, right? Something that is unfortunately still doing now, but then they really did it without any significant consequence for them. So I think that was quite remarkable, just to see that curve, and you can probably see these things also with Hunter Biden, whatever you think is like sounding like there is a lot of attention to it. You can sometimes just go to Google Trends, which I'm totally gonna do, so I don't sound like an unknowledgeable person, and see for myself. But there are other people who are doing these analyses. And my favorite analysis on the word Nazi, actually, sorry for bringing this up. It's so random, but since we started talking about this, we do know who started the World War II, right?
You mean the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact?
Yeah. So
Oh yes.
it's actually very funny, but it was just like it's such a known game to Russia, right? Like, just as they introduce words, just frequency of words into their propaganda, like Nazi, 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 and then you're like Nazi, Nazi. They are just as good at removing those words, because as things were moving towards the Second World War in Europe, and things were not going well and things did not look good, Russia, while looking for the next ally for waging the war, found Germany, and very quickly all of the media, all of the newspapers went from fascist, 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 Nazi, 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 Nazi to never mentioning any of it. And someone did an actual study on that just to see the frequency. And you see how, just as this curve goes up with Ukraine, it goes significantly down. And that was 1930s, right? So this is such an old game. It's not surprising at all. Please.
No, but sort of this image is, I guess, almost word for word. I guess reality inspires art. For Orwell's, I suppose both 1984 and Animal Farm, right, where you are at war with one country, and then next day, no, that was all enemy propaganda, right? And we're not at war with them. This is our besties, and we're at war with this other country here.
And this happened like for real, like from one day to another in the
Yeah.
30s. So
Yeah, the closure I wanted for modern day Ukraine and Nazis, right, is I think the reason it took in a way, right, is one, of course, there's a lot of resources that are poured into it, but also um, there is when you think about people who would be volunteering to fight, right? Like my association initially is people who are comfortable with firearms, who perhaps have a cult of a like for firearms to begin with, right? And I think there is a strong link then between them and people with more traditional values, right? Who are more on the right side of the political spectrum. Um, and I would guess then sort of that was the sparkle, right, that allowed this propaganda to launch in the first place. Uh, and it's important sort of still to distinguish those, right, because I think the army still attracts a lot of people who are just into firearms, right, who are into this, like who are very aligned with the idea of protection, but it doesn't necessarily make them a Nazi.
yeah, no, I see what you're getting at, right? And I think this mention of the initial reason, right, or where that might have come from, or the so-called inspiration. I would say that it's also worth mentioning that army in any sense did not exist in Ukraine in 2014. It was a freaking disaster. Our army was being ruined deliberately by our pro Moscow president that was also remaining in the office totally illegally and doing all kinds of batshit crazy things. The army was really deliberately ruined year in, year out, right? So that's why Ukraine also facing an invasion from a country that is what, like 30 times bigger than it, and very militarized. It did not have anyone to protect our borders, to protect our sovereignty. So that's why I do think that you had to be ideologically, especially in the context that existed in that point in time, you had to have some kind of affinity with not necessarily the right wing movement, but you had some people were like in the scout movement, so they just would know like the basics of survival with just basically like the bare minimum, and it was all kinds of different folks. But the one thing I know is that um there were all kinds of surprises, in terms of like, oh, this person is now, yesterday they were a poet, yesterday they were a historian, they were writing in Ukrainian and loving the Ukrainian language, and they ended up in the army. But by the same token, indeed, someone who was maybe had some kind of affinity with the firearms, which, by the way, you cannot just buy them freely in Ukraine. You have to find your ways, I guess, to be part of some kind of organization that does hunting, or I don't know,
Yeah,
whatever
like
it is.
you have to get a permit. Like
Yeah,
I
so
think
it
it's
was
like
it was just
security
a
on it.
yeah, it was a very random samples of the population. It's not like an army, the military as we think of it right now, that you will sit next to a former cook, but you will also sit next to a professional military who's been in there for 10 years. So I think that's also a very important context to give. And I think definitely, yeah, worth mentioning that if you want to piss off a Ukrainian, you can definitely mention the stereotype, and we will definitely be quite outraged. But you know, whenever Ukrainians are being confronted with a stereotype, it's just so ridiculous that we are almost like, I personally, I wouldn't probably even waste my breath explaining something like this to anyone, because I'm just like, well, this is just pure ridiculous. And if there is a country in Eastern Europe that has a problem with neo-Nazi movements, it is definitely Russia, because it uh, for all those reasons I mentioned before. Ooh, God.
Get your breath.
Let's go to the
Let's
the
now
fun
go.
stuff.
Yes.
Oh, you've mentioned you don't have the affinity with the firearms. Aren't you just shooting your AK-75, 47 every day?
Yes, I do.
Comrade.
Yeah.
Uh,
But also that's not even the accent. So accent is a funny one. Maybe we'll cover that in some other episode. Um, I guess you're edging your way to education or
drinking vodka.
drinking vodka.
Oh, sorry, it's actually Horilka in Ukrainian.
Yeah. So do you want to do both food and drinking culture, or shall we just tackle alcohol for the moment?
Tackle alcohol, literally. Is there any alcohol to tackle in this house? Yeah, let's just do both. Like, let's.
So I have an anecdote to share with you about
Yeah, of
alcohol.
course, I love
You
anecdotes.
want to start there?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was some kind of conference, and I have two German friends, and we were drinking because I think it was one of their birthday or something. Anyway,
You actually need a reason to drink at a conference.
no, but it was like a full night out. Like we had a drinking competition between the three of us. So usually those things like they need some kind of trigger. Anyway, it was an interesting setup because I think one of them is about 2 meters tall, like very buff, and the other one is shorter than me. I would guess like 175 perhaps. Right. So, uh, and I was anxious because I am not very big on alcohol. And then there are two Germans who are known for holding their alcohol. Like, I was like, okay, I'll do my best here. So then we went out and I could hold my liquor. I think in the end, I was exactly in between them, which just made me happy. Cool. Uh, but one of them, then of course, by that point we were very drunk, right? He asks me, "But I thought you were just gonna be so much better. Aren't Ukrainians like heavy drinkers?" And I was yeah, almost dumbfounded at that point because like I understand that the question was asked with no ill intent, but I started to think, do I actually know anyone who is a heavy drinker? And sort of, I think about a week later, I realized, oh yes, I think my grandpa's once removed cousin is. But otherwise, I don't think I've seen like I remember my family, even extended family, right? Um be really drunk. Like at most, like so the most drunk I saw them, right? They were perhaps slurring their words a bit. But it never went further than that. So um I was like, okay, I guess we are. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, especially the whole tolerance story. I'm a terrible drinker, so if I have anything like beyond one glass, like no matter how old or young I was, same was happening at 18. Couple of glasses. Well, okay, at 18 I did a little bit better in terms of tolerance, but my hangovers are terrible. I know that much, so it has to be like really an exceptional occasion for me to go
Someone's
and like
birthday.
someone's birthday,
Mhm.
obviously, and I have so many friends that could be a
Friends.
conference Friday,
Yeah.
evening.
You gotta fall asleep.
I gotta fall asleep. But in all honesty, it just gives me such a nasty headache in the morning, and not only it's just like the sleep part, I cannot sleep after alcohol. So then every time I'm about to have more than one drink, I'm just like, do I really want to have like face the consequences of this tomorrow? And so, personally, I am not a big drinker, but I also cannot say that it's as deeply ingrained into our culture as, for example, some other places that I just had the luxury to observe. Because okay, so and again, the intention here is not to make us look good, by making someone else look bad or anything like that, but just to put things in perspective. When I was in the UK during the summer months, London is just like wild. I'm looking at people and everyone is just standing in front of the pub with their insanely big beer, and I'm just like, are there no other ways to entertain yourself in the summer, you know? In Ukraine, you know, it's also going to be that people will be seated around like tables just having a casual drink, but I think just from generally the degree to which I observed people in other countries in terms of getting really quite drunk, you know, that was very surprising to me. Or like Scandinavia and people going like alcohol shopping to a different country, and I was just like, guys, what's wrong with you? I mean, you have, you know, like how much does it even matter? You know, that kind of stuff. And you know, realizing that it's probably okay that in Europe there is a drinking culture and it is to an extent affecting the way people are behaving and having or not having fun and things like that. But after observing, you know, as I mentioned, um the English, the French, I wouldn't say that we are anyhow standing out. I mean, the French are having their casual glass of wine at lunch and at dinner on quite a few days a week, right? Won't say that every French person does it, but if we are looking at averages, and then I'm just wondering, like, you know, Ukraine might be drinking different type of alcohol, but also it you would be surprised at the amount of people who are sitting like very civilized, beautiful side on terraces and just have a sipping a cocktail or sipping like a nice Aperol spritz. And I'm just like, it won't be much different than the streets of Italy or you know. So
My bet would be that you would see more alcohol in Italy out on the street than
yeah.
you would in Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the drinking culture definitely differs, right? So that's one point to
I
address.
think yeah, that's a big thing, right? That sort of you associate different, or not you personally, right? But associating is like different with more alcohol, while it is just different, right?
Yeah, a lot of alcohol in Ukraine is consumed at home at the dinner table when we have, for example, a birthday, and then your entire extended family is coming in, and you're like, I have no idea who you are or how we are related, but okay, fine. And that's where you know a lot of shots will be poured, right? That will be different than let's say Western Europe, where there's a lot more kind of wine culture going on. Again, it's not an obligation to drink a lot. You can also just take like little nibbles out of your shot glass for the entire evening if you don't want to drink any strong
You can also
liquor.
just say no at some point.
Yeah, you can just also say no, or can say I want wine, I want a beer, I want actually just a lemonade. Leave me alone. But there will be a kind of more um, you know, food and drink consumption happening at home, not in restaurants, where I would probably expect that you could build a little bit more of that infamous tolerance that people are assuming we're having just from like the popular culture and social media, whatnot. But I personally, as I said, don't think that it's as widespread anymore. And probably it's still some Soviet stereotypes just kind of barging into the room and saying, "Hey, you know, in Ukraine they just drink."
You know, I mean, I suppose it is part of the association of Ukraine with Russia,
Yeah,
right? And then you get to deal with this thing.
yeah, very likely. But also one of the things to mention is that you know, if you do want to have some kind of nice tincture, which is basically like hard liquor with a little bit of a fruity flavor or herby flavor, Ukraine the place to explore it. So we promise to keep it fun, right? So if you're going to Ukraine, you're wondering what you're gonna drink, you can find that, but also really good wines. Um, don't know if you have favorites you can recommend.
Not really, no. So I got into wines a bit later in my life, like after I left Ukraine, right? And I think sort of I immediately went to natural wines, and I don't think Ukraine has.
Oh, Ukraine will have everything by now.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I know that there is um like I would bet I could find like about 5 producers definitely who make natural wines, but I don't think it's as widespread as I don't know, say Slovenia, right, or France.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably right on that one. I hate natural wine. Sorry.
Good,
So
more for
more for you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's whenever I see a pet nut, I'm like, no. Thanks. I want my basic bubbles. I'm realizing probably we need to wind down a little bit on the topic and probably address the food, which is how we basically are going to ensure that everyone watching this podcast is going to start making their plans to go to Ukraine. What can you say about the food culture in Ukraine?
So I think as far as myths and stereotypes go, I know one, and I don't know over there, unfortunately, but I would say it's relatively accurate. It's about smetana consumption.
The what?
The consumption of smetana.
Smetana. Okay, do you
Yes.
want to explain what smetana is?
Yeah, I saw it usually translated as creme fraiche.
Mhm.
I,
Sour cream?
yeah, you can.
Yeah, not everyone is Francais here, you know. Oh.
Excuse-moi. Yeah. Do I also need to explain what sour cream is, or is that enough an explanation?
Please go us through the exact process of. No, I think sour cream is enough. Oh my god, but sour cream is so good. What can you not like mix as sour cream? If it's sweet, it goes with sour cream. If it's salty, it goes with sour cream.
If it's savory, you add sour cream, it becomes even more savory. Uh,
I went
just
now. I want to like buy a jar of sour cream and just
just
eat it.
bathe in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like, yeah. Take a.
I mean,
spoon.
that's actually so. Perhaps that's an image that I could vouch for. Perhaps not these days, but I think when I was a child, my grandma would offer me now and again like just a cup of sour cream, and I don't think I ever took. I'm sorry, grandma.
Was it offered alongside with the salo and bread and milk?
No. So my grandma and my grandpa are different people, and they
Oh,
also had different preferences when it came
okay,
to.
good.
So my grandma was never big on salo, which is again one of the products that is consumed widely. Yeah, but it was never really to my taste. Maybe I'm just wrong. Like something in the sort of ingrained in Ukrainian cultural codes in me went sideways, right? And I should be just eating smetana that sits on top of sala, right? And I guess you would also want some what you call it, garlic bread to go with it.
Pushki.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
Um,
But you're not. Oh,
no,
so
no,
you're
no,
not. So you are not consuming that for lunch and dinner and breakfast
no,
and
no, no,
snack.
no.
Okay. I mean, I'm not eating a lot of Ukrainian food, but I'm daydreaming about it very often. I'm just like, oh, wouldn't it be just so nice? But I think one of the parts about like the Ukrainian food is that people might be inclined to think about it as a kind of like quite bland, right? So they're like, oh, I've been to Poland, maybe I've been to, I don't know, Lithuania. So there's a lot of potatoes, there was all sorts of like dumplings, and it's indeed a lot of sour cream. It's all very rich. But I think it's also like, just as I mentioned just now, these really nice cafes with like patios and terraces. You'll find so much gastronomic culture in Ukraine that is
Yeah, so
just
there's definitely a big difference right, between traditional and modern day.
and there are really nice places where you get a nice modern twist on the traditional cuisine. Like the other time when we were in Ukraine, my husband took borscht with pear. So like those. I think it might have been a smoked pear, but it was just like it's so difficult for me not to get hungry, just like not run out of this room. But also all kinds of like pates and so good. Sorry, I need to take a sip of water or I'll die.
Yeah, true. So I think modern day gastronomical culture is very comparable to just your average European rates, where you encounter in bigger cities more variety that comes usually from outside the country, right? You see like an explosion of uh, just all kinds of Asian places, like you were talking Thai, Vietnamese, Japanese, Chinese, I suppose. Um,
But also Ukrainian own, like right there will be places that will sell oysters. So for any oyster lovers, for €1 a piece or something like that, or even cheaper. And I asked once, while I was in that fine establishment, it was like in 2019. I asked once, like, where do you guys import the oysters from? And they said, Well, we're not importing them because they are actually from the, I don't know, somewhere, a farm, oyster farm on the Black Sea. And I was very happy to hear that as well. So you can like go and be fully decadent, and then, it's even now, like, it sounds strange, like, and so again, I think this overlaps a little bit with other podcast topics, but you go and sometimes there's going to be a power outage and a blackout menu, as it's called. So only things that can be basically consumed while there's no, prepared, and yeah, most importantly prepared, but you can consume them while there's no electricity. And it's just going to be really amazing things. Well, if you get the chance to go to Ukraine sometime soon, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Some other wild things, random wild things to say about Ukraine. Just gotta not think about sour cream. Oh, it's so difficult. Uh, I think how we are offering and refusing food. So it'd be like, Donna, are you hungry?
Oh, and I'm supposed to say no, and then no again, and then no again, and I'd be like, okay, fine.
Okay, fine. Here, I said, and then I'm like, oh, fantastic! Now I'm gonna feed you to death. So then, yeah, it's true. I'm realizing I'm very Dutch when I am cooking dinners. And my husband does this as well. We are only cooking for the two of us. So whenever I'm like having this urge to invite people for dinner, I realize that I'll have to go and do like identical groceries to like expand on our existing groceries, because everything is just for the two of us. But in Ukraine, we very much often cook a lot of borscht. And then we consume it throughout the week because it just gets better by the day. And there's always enough for an extra person or two.
Yeah, I wonder, because your experience of in Ukraine is mostly living with your family, is that right?
Yeah, but also living by myself and also eating the same thing many times in the week, because I just kind of cooked a ton of it, and I wasn't really very concerned with like
Right. So, but I
I
think
was
both of
gonna
those
spend out.
are sort of. I don't know where, like, what would be your median food consumer in Ukraine, right? But both of those, they come from relatively specific context, right? Because in one case you cook for the whole family, and then if you like, if there is only one person cooking, then you, of course, you want to do a bigger batch, right? So you
Yeah, yeah,
have to
for sure.
come back into the
Poor
kitchen.
mom of mine having to feed so many people every time.
And then if you're a student, that's also a specific demographic. Uh, I don't think like I definitely learned a lot while I was cooking for myself, like during my bachelor's masters. But you, I wouldn't say that you stick to what a sane person would do. Let's put it that way.
Well, tell me, how wild did you go?
No, but as in sort of often I would cook more even if I didn't really want to eat it for that long because I just didn't want to come back into the kitchen and sort of all those stories. It's not that I did wild experiments, but it's more of I think that's a bit of a distorted image. Like if I ask my single friends now live in Ukraine, I think they'd be more sort of in the usual batch or portion size than sort of what I remember, right? Of say my grandma, right, cooking like a huge pot of borscht.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, definitely. I mean, but I think that's one of those things that are also probably valid for multiple cultures. Like maybe in terms of that, the Netherlands is a little bit more of an exception, just Western Europe in general. That yeah, definitely. If there's especially if there's only one parent cooking, which yeah, unfortunately in Ukraine, I guess it's still most often the mother of the family, and also having to work a full-time job. It's very expected, but I think it's also, it just kind of hits differently. Right now, I wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, I'm okay to eat borscht 4 times a week, but when I'm in Ukraine, I'm like, oh, borscht every day, yeah, please, So it's also part of that cultural context, and I think that's also in terms of um the availability also of resources, right? There are some things that you can only buy in a big um bulk amount, because you don't really know when it's going to be next time you'll be able to buy cabbage, potatoes, and meat in these amounts. Hello, 1990s. So I think that's where also this came from, and you just kind of had to roll with what was available in the economically challenging times. But I think our tradition, just kind of like having food as our love language think that's like I don't know if you disagree
Yeah,
with that one, but
yeah.
and
I think there's definitely a culture of food sharing. So
yeah. Yeah, and it's also one of the things that you will spontaneously show up at someone's doorstep, and they will always have something like, oh yeah, I just like I have nothing in the house, and then suddenly the table is set, and you're like, I actually only came here for like one thing and just like have a chat, but things are yeah things are spontaneous, and when they are spontaneous, there's gonna be food on the table and sour cream, and there will be a future, and there will be sour cream. Okay,
okay, do you want to wrap up?
I think it's a good moment to wrap up. I just
Okay.
got very hungry. I'm gonna eat my second dinner.
Cool.
So, if there's one thing we've learned, is that you need to uh like and share this
Subscribe.
podcast. Like, share, subscribe. I
Uh,
don't know what I'm doing.
is that a tectonic dance?
Uh, yeah, I'm the pre 2008 generation. Yeah, please do let us know what you think about this. Wherever you can, share your opinion. It's very important for us. Thanks for listening, and
Love you.
see you next time.
Cheers.